What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Life Inner Show. I'm your host, Jason Wojo, and on the Life Inner Show, we help people make more, work less, and most importantly, create a life and business they love. I am joined by my co-host, Polish Peter.
No fancy word today? I mean, I've heard you describe some fancy words, but nothing today?
My Calapigian friend, Polish Peter.
Calapigian.
Yep.
Well, that doesn't sound good to me. Right now, that does not sound like a good thing.
It's a really funny word. And actually, I'm going to regret saying that because someone will have to look it up, but it's it's not actually true anyway. So anyway, with that,
okay.
Dude, this is the benefit of a vocabulary. You know, I mean, I try to use big words to confuse myself.
Exactly. Listen, guys, the operative word in there is I try. Try is the operative word. I try to use big words, and then he complexifies things, and
that's right.
It just doesn't work out.
It's all downhill from there. Well, listen, man, today on this episode, we have a friend of mine, Kevin Snyder. He's a professional speaker. He's excellent. He really is. He speaks to businesses, to colleges. He's really makes a huge impact with people. And we're going to talk today a little bit about business, a little bit about the mindset involved in business, a little bit about what it's like to go in business for yourself, and some of those things. I'm really excited for this episode.
Yeah, and you know what, guys? Listen to this episode from the point of, because he shares a few stories in there. And I want you guys to listen from the point of, do I have similar stories? Not like he has, but how can I use those stories for my own self, for my own entrepreneur journey, for my own why, for my own must, because we touch on that. And I think it's an important aspect when it comes to being an entrepreneur and going on this journey, because it's not all smooth sailing, you know? So yep, I loved it.
Let's jump in right now. Kevin Snyder. Kevin Snyder, welcome to the Life Inner Show, man. Thank you.
Awesome to be with you,
man. I'm psyched. You know, so I got to tell it. So everyone, I met Kevin. Well, I knew of Kevin for several years, and when I was in Toastmasters, I saw him give a presentation on how to become a professional speaker. And I'll tell you, this guy, quite honestly, it blew me away. Like, I was just, man, at that moment, I was like, wow, this guy is a true professional and knows his craft. And so, with that, a friendship has kind of grown, and we're in some groups together and NSA together, and so we've got to spend a lot of time together. And what I've learned about you is you are and you speak on a number of expert topics that people really benefit from. Not only you have an audience of colleges and college students, and you help students with a number of things, but also businesses. And in particular, in this episode, I was hoping to dive into entrepreneurship a little bit. And you talk on this, you teach on this. And, you know, Life in Air, we have a lot of people that want to leave their job, right? Like, this is a goal for them, but they don't know a lot about entrepreneurship. They probably weren't trained as an entrepreneur. They're not completely aware of all the things that are involved in that. And so before we get into that, though, just tell people a little bit about yourself and your journey, your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up in a family of teachers. My mom was a math teacher. My dad was a preacher. My only business expertise background was cutting grass as a teenager. I knew nothing about starting a business, and everything that I do now is entrepreneurial in a way. I mean, writing a book. I mean, have my own speaking business. I got I have a sailing charter company that I wouldn't even call that a business. I just found a way to get paid taking people sailing.
Hey, man, it sounds good.
Yeah. And I do feel like too, this, it's always nice to have different revenue streams. So, most businesses don't just launch, right? Seeds have to be planted, and those seeds have to grow. But anyway, my background though, like how you mentioned it, was in higher education, working with students. I struggled as a teenager mentally. I dealt with depression, and growing up, I always felt like I wasn't good enough for anything. Go to college, don't expect to make it. I tried to drop out a few times, and the dean of students never let me. Every time I went to his office, he had to sign a withdrawal paperwork form. He just, Dean Terry was his name, and he says, "Kevin, there's something about you. Just give us another chance." And fast forward about 6 months, had a complete transformation in college. I did a couple things differently, got more engaged on campus, got rid of the long distance relationship, got a better roommate. I mean, but point is, college was transformational. And then by the time I was graduating as a senior with a marine biology degree, I knew that I probably wouldn't be doing anything with marine biology. And that's where I said, what can I do? And I worked for my fraternity for 2 years as a traveling consultant. And then through that, I realized I really want to work at colleges. So I got back my master's and my doctorate in higher education, and then took a couple different jobs in higher education and became a dean of students. And then I left that job to do my speaking. So it's kind of, we're all on this journey together. It's a big journey, but yeah, if you would have told me even 10 years ago I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
So
it's funny because you said like you wanted to get out of college, you wanted to quit college when you were going to it, and then you became the dean of students. You went back to teaching college.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, working on the administration side of the house, like in student affairs as a dean, that's where my goal with that position was to be a supporter of students, to be able to provide programming for students, be able to connect with students outside the classroom, and support them. And really my energies, my passion is always, and I've always connected to people who maybe have some adversity in front of them and wanting just to let them know that they're not alone. Because that's what I battled. I mean, I think right now we have a huge loneliness and isolated, and especially now with this COVID and pandemic that we're in, I mean, we're so isolated now more than I think there's going to be some residual effect on, I mean, that's why people are craving to get together, right? And they want to feel that connection.
Right.
So,
man, well, and I'm wondering too, if there's not like a little, a twist of fate here in that it was the dean that poured into you so much that didn't let you quit. And now you saw this opportunity to pour into other people basically from the similar perspective, it sounds like. What was that transition like? So was it directly from that job that you went into your speaking business?
Yeah. So who's going to see this again? So there's more to the story.
Okay.
And I'm not saying it wasn't all rainbows and what's that phrase? Rainbows and
unicorns, maybe?
Yeah. It was tough. And I had been speaking though for fun as a hobby. And I was speaking for fun, talking to college students while I was working in different positions over the years in higher education to become a dean. So I was getting, I mean, I was with an agency called Campus Speak. I highly recommend them for folks if they want to get into college speaking, but you don't need a bureau to speak. I mean, they're going to take a cut, right? And so, but I was already speaking for fun, but that's what it was. It was a hobby. And that's something I think a lot of people need to realize is treat it like a hobby. Well, that's the result you'll get. Treat it like a business, and knowing how to treat it like a business, right? Which is more strategy, and yeah, you got to up your game. You got to do things a little differently. Well, then you can probably expect a different reality. So, I mean, I was serious. I mean, it was a hobby, but here I was getting paid in one or two speeches what my job was paying me for the whole month. And when I became the dean, I'll be honest with you, it was a real tough position for me. It was a lot. 90% of it was putting out fires, dealing with angry students, angry parents, and all sorts of after about a year and a half, I thought, I think I could be much more effective speaking to audiences and empowering them than dealing with these just countless fires every single day that I don't feel like I'm making a difference. And that for me was the awareness that it took a while, because I always thought to myself, well, speaking is not my career, higher education is, and then it flipped. But I didn't just quit my job as a dean and then become a speaker. I'd already planted some seeds. I already had a foundation I could go back to. But when I quit my job, then it was real. I mean, I burnt the boat. There was no retreat from the island. It was, I mean, that's kind of how bad it was too. It was like, yeah, if I'm going to do this, and here's the reason for that is because they had me sign. Well, I shouldn't. you can keep this in the video, but just I want people to know, sometimes you can't speak if your employer says you can't speak. I mean, there's certain things you can't do. And that's something else I just didn't like. I was like, don't tell me what I can and can't do. Like what I do on the weekends should be my business. Some people play golf. I like to speak. Why does it matter?
Yeah.
So it was interesting that dream job conditioned me to not speak. So, that ended up being the reason why I left. Man.
So, well, I think what you just experienced in that position is something that a lot of people experience in a different arena where, they're sick of somebody else controlling your schedule, how much they work, how much they make, what they can do, what they can't do. And I think that's a big reason people decide to go out on their own, start their own business, become entrepreneurs. And so I just replay this for me. So you're kind of realizing this is the inevitable conclusion as to what you want to do. It's perhaps still a hobby at this point. When did it become a business, and what was that mental shift for you like when you had, because I'll tell you, I look at you now, man, you're one of the hardest working people I know. And I know you teach people to be speakers, and you've told me, man, some of these people just think that you just like write a speech and that's it, and you're going to be like, world famous, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. Like, what was that transition like for you?
Painful. I mean, it was painful at times. I mean, I'll give you a quick story. When I left High Point University, and I'll be fully transparent about this, man, I moved from Florida to take that Dean of Students job. I left 3 rental properties in Florida, all of them which I was underwater, meaning I owed more money than the home was worth. This was in 2009, right? So in the midst of the Great Recession, I knew that when I left Florida, I probably would be looking at 3 foreclosures. And guess what happened? Banks started wanting to collect. So here I was, wearing my suit and tie, going in to be the Dean of Students, right? And in the back of my head, I got collectors blowing my phone up. I got, all these things. And I said, well, there's nothing I could have done differently, right? I just got to deal with this. So one of my strategies was to try to protect the foreclosure was I hired an attorney who was going to stall that process and try to short sale the properties. And he goes, in order to do that, you got to file for bankruptcy. Now, just hearing that, I was like, I had money. Not a lot, but I had some, but the strategy was file for bankruptcy, never go through with it, but just file for bankruptcy to stall the foreclosures, if that kind of makes sense. And again, this was 2009. This was like, so I followed this attorney's advice. Well, when you file for bankruptcy, all your creditors are informed that you just filed for bankruptcy. So guess what they're going to do? They're not going to give you any credit. So the 2 credit cards that I kind of lived on, I paid them off, but I basically used them because I didn't have a lot of free flowing cash. Those basically got cut. And the night before those got literally taken from me at a Walmart, I was speaking for Anheuser-Busch in Missouri. Here I was getting pens and pencils and some paper, getting ready to speak for Anheuser-Busch. And the manager from Walmart comes up to me and takes both credit cards and says, we have to take these. I'm like, what? Like, how am I going to get home? Right. And luckily I had a debit card. But I mean, that's how bad it was. And that debit card is what I basically went with cash. But, fast forward about 6 months later, I mean, I didn't just start getting speaking gigs. So to answer your question directly, it took me about 1.5 years to really start getting any income coming in for speaking, which is why I always tell folks, look, if you've got a position now where you can plant seeds on the side, you're going to have to hustle hard with any available time you got, but you don't need to quit your day job or a full-time job to start a new business on the side. Treat it like a garden. Make sure you got the right seeds, make sure you're planting it in the right type of soil, and then you're going to have to nurture it. And then once those seeds start growing and you start seeing fruit, then perhaps would be the time to make that strategic decision. When I left to become a dean, I knew that I couldn't speak at all and I was unhappy. So for me, I said, well, I already have seeds that I can go back to. I know how to plant them, but it doesn't mean those seeds grow overnight. And I think in the first 6 months, and I write this in the book, so I wrote a book called Pay to Speak, literally to outline my process for it, because I wanted people to know, hey, if it looks easy, it's because that's a great speaker. And I'm not saying I'm a great speaker. I'm saying a great speaker makes it look easy. A great entrepreneur makes it look easy. But, Wojo, I was up at 3:30 a.m. today. And I was designing some stuff because I got this huge keynote coming up next Tuesday, and I'm anxious about it. I'll be honest. I'm anxious about it. You and I were talking about it earlier today. And so, hey, all hands on deck. It is what it is. And the only thing they're going to see is the 45 minutes I'm in front of them.
Right. Yeah. They don't see everything, and that's business in general, right? In entrepreneurship, you don't see everything else that goes into it. And I think that's, in some cases that can be a real disservice, if you fail to acknowledge all the hard work and the time and the energy and effort that went into it. Just to go back for a second about your story about leaving, mine is similar. I used real estate investing to get out of my job, but similar to you, I had done 3 deals to make sure, like, hey, I want to see if this works. I want to see if I can do it. I want to learn the craft as much as I can while still having a little bit of a security blanket with my job. And then I made that jump. But even similar to you, but mine was not. It wasn't an upward straight trajectory. Like, right? It was bumpy. It was a very bumpy road. And so I think that's very wise advice. How did you learn what it took to be successful in business? Like, as you're figuring this out, like, did you figure this out on your own? Did you have a mentor? Did you have somebody help you? How did you like, I mean, cause this is just like, and this is, I guess, specific to, you might give an answer specific to business, but I want our listeners to listen regardless of what industry they're in, because there could be some similarities here.
I always recommend to folks, you got to have mentors. I mean, call them mentors, call them coaches. I mean, you need to have a team of people that you can get ideas from. As a speaker too, I'm a member of 2 different mastermind groups. One I lead, and that's more of an inspiring speaker mastermind where I'm helping them. And it's a group of people of like mind who want to grow their speaking business. I'm in another mastermind that I pay to be in, and it's 5 of us. And we're all full-time professional speakers, which means this is all we do. And that's, there's 5 of us, and what we do, we meet quarterly, and we basically critique each other, and we talk about challenges, and we, ask questions, and it's extremely helpful to get feedback. I'm still figuring this out, man. I mean, I've done over 1,000 presentations, and it's like, hey, I've been doing this. My June 2nd, 2000 was my very first speech at University of South Florida. I still remember that day. It was horrible. It was painful. Hated it, right? But I remember it. And 20 years later, I'm still, any goal I've ever achieved in my business, it's like, okay, now what? And I feel I'm grateful. I'm appreciative, but it's like this thirst that will never go away. And it's not about money, man. It has nothing to do. Well, it probably has a little bit to do with money, but most of it has to do with me just setting my eyes on something. And I think Steve Jobs said this quote. He goes, "When you care about something deep enough, you don't have to be pushed. The vision pulls you." Mm-hmm. And that's how I feel with speaking. It's also how I feel with coaching too. It's like, hey, I was a little late getting on this call with you because I had a coaching client, and it's like, I truly want to help, whether I'm talking to an audience or I'm talking to somebody one-on-one, I truly, truly want to help people. So I feel like this is my calling right now. And I think when you feel like something's your calling, you get up. Like I didn't need an alarm to get up at 3:30. My body woke me up. It's like, cause you love it. And you also feel like it's what you're designed to do. So, but I think, coaching is great, but I think folks need to know that there's a process. So like, you got to find, and I'd always recommend in short, find 3 people that are doing what you think you want to do and study the heck out of them. Like, buy their books, stalk them on YouTube, stalk them on social media, reach out to them. If they have a coaching program, sign up for it, figure out a way to do it. My first coach. So when I first, and I'll shut up after this. When I resigned at High Point, I pulled money out. I didn't have any money, remember? Like, I pulled money out of my 401k to pay for a coach. Now, I don't recommend somebody do that. I'm not recommending that. Talk to your CPA. But that's how bad I wanted it, man. And here I was thinking, hey, my whole life I wanted to be a dean. And this goes back to Peter. My whole life I wanted to be a dean of students. Everything I had done pushed me and guided me toward that direction. Got my master's in a doctorate degree, right? And I get that job, and I'm like, eh. And I was kind of like, what in the world is going on? But then, I mean, I wanted speaking so bad that I was like, if I got to do this, I got to do it. I mean, heck, it's my money anyway. I mean, I paid a lot of taxes and penalties, but I was like, who cares? I'll make that back in one speaking gig.
Yeah. So I want to ask you something, because you mentioned a couple of cool things as you were talking just now. One, 20 years later, I'm still learning. I mean, I'm still learning my crafts, still going. And I think that's an important point to put out there, because some people feel like, well, he's an expert. How am I ever going to get there, right? Or it's like this kind of like a huge thing that they kind of freak out and they don't take action. But I totally agree with what you're saying there, because I still, to this day, still deal with my craft, right? Still learning, still getting coaches, still, learning different things. I just recently heard someone say that Tony Robbins, he still spends thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on learning and coaching and all kinds of stuff like that, right? So that's the first point. And the second point you mentioned is that must. I feel like there is a big must, that big pull that you have. So tell me about, how important do you think it is when it comes to being an entrepreneur?
I think that vision, that we all have I think that's the key, because then there's like no option for failure, and I think that could be a struggle for an entrepreneur, because you also, especially, and here's the caveat to some of this, if whoever this entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur, if you were the breadwinner of the family, or you've got a family and you got to pay the bills, hey, look, I get that. I mean, but what about 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 2 years from now? Are you still saying the same thing? Like, I do a lot of presentations on just workforce culture and empowerment. And I mean, there's studies out that show that the far majority of the workforce is miserable to unhappy, right? Because they've allowed that mindset to then give them this feeling of what I call learned helplessness. Like, okay, well, I guess nothing's going to change, so why bother? No, like, plant the freaking, number one, figure out what seed, well, no, figure out what fruit you want. You got to vision it. It's, that Peter, it's like most people know, they feel like there's more, they feel untapped because they don't really know what they want. Mm-hmm. But when you have clarity on what you want and you feel aligned to it for the right reason, it's almost like you vision it as if it's only a matter of time. And then you work backward from the vision. Well, what are the steps I need to take to achieve that vision? And that's where a coach, or that's where a process or strategy, that's where it comes into play. Because whether you're going to be a professional speaker or start your own business in blank or start a coffee shop, just because you got a business doesn't mean you're going to have customers. So, I mean, there's so many layers. I mean, we're just kind of scratching the surface with some of this, I guess. But I like to keep things simple and fun. I like the garden analogy, because you got to figure out what seeds you want to plant and then do all those things, and nothing happens overnight. So, but the vision for that garden is what will fuel some of that desire to work on it.
Man, what is your advice to people that don't know what they want? This is a common thing I hear, where they know they're unhappy, they know they don't want what they have, but they don't know what better looks like. Do you have any advice for someone that's struggling with that question?
That's a power question. That's
a tough one, man. Like
let's just acknowledge, number one, that's a tough question. But it's a power question, which means if somebody can answer that question, we're talking about, that's a different level of consciousness, I believe. There are a lot of people that have to do things in life. And I think it's the extraordinary people that get to do things in life that are the game changers that really leave this world a better place. But it all starts, I think, with the vision and then knowing what you want. I mean, that's your question.
Yeah. Jason,
was how do you know what you want? I'm like,
man, dude, I'll tell you, this is a tough one that we get. And I think there's a couple, and I don't think there's Peter, you chime in here too. I don't know if there's a set prescription for that, but one of the things I know for sure is like, either one, look at somebody who you admire and see what they're doing and see what it is about that they're doing that you really resonate with and it excites you. Or what are the things that light you up? Like when you do them, you love what you do. Like, so for instance, you know, in a different life, I might have been like a rock and roll guitar player because I love playing guitar.
Really?
And time passes forever. I can wear a wig, man. But there are people that will say like, hey, I'm really good at guitar. How could I make this a business and be an entrepreneur with this? So, okay, well, I'm going to give online lessons. Okay, I'm going to be in a band. Okay, I'm going to start my own guitar company, and you know, you have a Les Paul, or you know, so there's, but at the heart of that, it's almost like, I think you have to kind of, it's not just an intellectual exercise, it's like a heart exercise. What do you feel like when you do it? You just light up, and now you might, but which brings me to the second point, which is you got to do something to see if you like it. You can't intellectualize this thing and think, like I mean, maybe you could say, I'll try this, but at some point you have to try it to decide, to see if it has the same effect you thought it would, because we've both been in positions where we thought we'd be happy doing something, and we found out the reality wasn't exactly what we expected, and so we switched, we pivoted, and we tried something else.
Can I add something to that? Because I have this question pop up for me on the mic. I mean, Kevin, you don't know that I'm a coach, right? But that question pops up sometimes for me with my students. I actually have one right now. She keeps saying, I don't know what I want, right? And a couple of things that you mentioned that I think sparked for me is, one is you said you have a 15-month-old, right? And by the way, if you're not putting Tony Robbins CDs for her yet, then I don't know what you're doing something wrong, dude. No, but on the serious side of things, I think as kids, right, we dream a lot. We dream, we have this freedom to be able to go and dream and think about different things, and there is no constraints. And at some point, someone in our lives tells us, okay, enough of that. Now we got to get serious, right? And I think we get conditioned to a point like, okay, you need to do this. Stop dreaming. Enough of that. Whether it's at school, I mean, think about it. You get in school at some point, they tell us, you got to be quiet. You got to sit in your chair, do your work. Don't say anything out loud that's not inappropriate, right? And that's it, right? And I think at some point, we basically stop dreaming because now I got to be serious. I got to be an adult. And I think what ends up happening, that puts that curiosity, that creativity kind of like squishes it, right? And I think for us, when somebody's asking us, I think for us is to get the inner child out of them a little bit. Because I think for you, like being a coach, I don't think your inner child has ever left. What do you think?
Yeah, I remember growing up, my mom would tell me, I can't wait for you to have kids because I don't think you're ever going to grow up. I mean, I was always having these, and even with depression, I had, like, for example, one of my signature stories that I share, but like, I loved watching The Price is Right every single day. And for me, it was like this vision. I mean, this kind of ties into a perfect example of, I was this game show fanatic. I mean, I wanted to meet Bob Barker. Well, all right. I arranged my class schedule around the show. I studied every show. I knew the price of every prize they had. And then I met a guy who was on the show, and he told me exactly how to get on the show. So I skipped my college graduation. I drive across the country to get on The Price is Right. We show up the morning of the taping, and Bob was sick. The show was canceled. So I had to drive back across the country. Then I got home. Mom gives me a great big hug, and she looks at me and she goes, how bad do you want it? Go back out there. Live that dream. So order tickets. A couple of days later, that time I flew back. Well, got there. Called my buddies up again. They all came down. We get in the studio audience, and I get called down to contestants row. And then I knew if I got called down to contestants row, I knew I'd get on stage because I knew the prices of every item that they had. I get on stage, I shake hands with Bob Barker, and that's the living manifestation of the dream. Yeah. Now, whether I won anything or not is just bonus gravy, right? But it's interesting that story, and I didn't realize it at the time. It took a couple of years to connect the dots, but that story then became my signature presentation in my speeches. So here's what's interesting is I believe, at least, our passions are cyclical. And when we pursue our passions, when we pursue what interests us and what makes us, I think, Wojo, you kind of hinted on this before, when we find something that we want to do that makes us come alive, you know, like, for example, when we do it, time stops. Like for you, it's probably, you know, playing guitar, you know, like for me, playing keyboard. So I got my keyboard here, and I don't know if you can see it, but like I play piano even in my presentations. So hello to my virtual studio. But anyway, I can sit down and play piano, and what I thought might be 5 or 10 minutes is actually like 2 hours. But there's a difference between me pursuing piano as a career and me pursuing maybe, you know, my speaking. So I think I'm kind of dripping a lot here. I don't know if I'm even making any sense, but I think when people identify something that makes them come alive and they love it and they don't have to explain it, like it's just, it is what it is, then I think they should pay attention to that and see where it goes, you know?
And even though like you're not a full-time career musician, you have figured out a way to integrate your love for playing that into your business.
Yep. And I'm sure that I know that there are other speakers that incorporate music and this and that, but I mean, I get people singing, I call it keynote karaoke. I play 1 or 2 songs. I mean, now that I'm virtual, guess what I can do? I can bring the stage to my audiences like never before. I couldn't have done this pre-pandemic. So what I decided to do as I was building my studio, I said, okay, when most people are complaining about the virus, I'm asking myself, how can I still move forward and differentiate? And now I'm able to do that. So I think, you know, adversity doesn't define us. It actually it reveals us. And what adversity does is it gives us opportunities to grow further with the right mindset. But, you know, I think one thing too, and I think we're kind of in this new generation. I mean, we don't really hear the phrase midlife crisis anymore. I mean, because we are that generation and we're pursuing things and, you know, whereas I'll speak for my parents. I mean, the baby boomer generation, that's where the midlife crisis came from because people thought they were doing what they thought they should be doing in order, right? Oh, how did that work? You know, I mean, they're 40 years old and they're like, what? Oh my gosh, life has gone by. And what? Well, I think now people realize how important it is to live life, to truly live life, and to pay attention to maybe some of those inner desires that in past generations were kind of just covered up.
Man, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about it that way. That's totally true. And so as somebody, do you think that, you know, Peter mentioned the must for entrepreneurship, living the life you want to live. Do you think for a lot of, do you think that everybody can be an entrepreneur and a business owner, or is this only for a select few? Like I've wondered about this myself. Yeah,
you know, that's a man, you're good with questions. I think I'd have to, I'm trying to think of the perfect way to answer this, and I don't think there is a perfect way. I think the answer to that is no. I don't think everybody's really meant to be an entrepreneur, and what does that even mean? I mean, I think some people, based on, I mean, you get 100 different people in the room, you got 100 different personality styles, and you know, my wife, for example, had her own business as an interior designer, and she was, you know, the CEO, president, and toilet cleaner. I mean, everything was her. Well, now, you know, she is a very successful real estate agent. She's on a team and she's not the owner of that company or of that agency. And right now she's probably more happy doing that, although she has an entrepreneurial mindset and she technically is a business owner because being in real estate. But I think for her, I think sometimes seasons change too. But do I think that, you know, are certain people born with? I don't know. I think sometimes it's nurturing too and exposure. Like for me, I never thought about. Here's the thing: growing up in my family, like my mom was a teacher, my dad was a preacher. I never even thought about having my own business. I just figured, well, I'll go get a job, work for a company like mom and dad did.
Right. Right.
So it kind of surprised me being an entrepreneur just because I wasn't exposed to it.
Well, it's the same here, man. Because like I'll tell you, I do not have any entrepreneurial blood in my family. I never thought of myself as having like I had to learn it, and it was a learned skill for sure. It was not natural. I have met people that seem to just like the nature versus nurture thing, whatever influence they've had, they're off to the races with it. It just is a natural fit for them. So I had to learn this, and so I'm reluctant to say that nobody, couldn't do it if they really, really wanted to. But I think also is a consideration, like some people just don't want to. They'd rather have, like you kind of alluded to, they don't want everything that is associated with owning their own business or being an entrepreneur. And so they've made some choices, and like the season of life could influence you. And so I think it's a complex kind of interaction of a number of things. Tell me, what are some of the biggest lessons you have learned? And by the way, I got to tell you, this is a little bit of a tangent, but as you were telling me the Bob Barker story, all of the steps that we previously talked about in a different concept kind of popped up for me. So like you had a vision. It was a must for you. You did the research and found out how to get on the show. You checked out the prices of all, this is almost a mini business lesson, really, if you think about it. And so it was really incredible how that all ties together.
He also had the right people around there. I mean, think about it. His mom said, listen, how bad do you want it? Right.
Yeah.
If he came home and she said, you know what? Yeah, you failed. Go do your homework, right? It would be a different story, right? So I think that's an important aspect too.
Yep. Yeah. So, but all these are applicable to businesses, right? And so along those lines, you speak with a lot of different businesses, like for all sides of businesses. What are some of the things that you could share with people as saying like, hey, here's some of the things that work, or here's some of the things that don't work? Just like, are there any commonalities that you're seeing with your experiences?
Yeah, well, great question. So I do believe the number one determinant of people's success in general begins with how they think. Not to sound airy-fairy, but it is impossible to have a growth mindset with negative thinking, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we all have to be self-motivated to do what we do, and then also to know that what we do matters and how to make a difference with it. And in my speaking, I can give you story after story after story of people. I talk about the Pike Place fish market. I have a personal experience with that, about where they're throwing the fish. It has nothing to do with throwing fish, but they've created an experience that's made them world famous because they did things differently, and it didn't cost them a penny, right? So that's a whole story that I share that gets people thinking differently about how do we create experiences with our employees so that our employees will be empowered to make experiences with our customers, right? And so a lot of that comes down to empowerment too, and not just motivation, but how am I empowering my people to take risk, to try things that maybe we've never done before. Einstein defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over, yet expecting a different result. And so what I think from a lot of organizations, the good leaders of those organizations that do believe in people, I've worked for a company one time, no names, not gonna say who, but they literally had a mantra on the CEO's door that says, I think it said results, not reasons. And this person was driving people, like driving results. It's all about results. And you know what he was actually doing? He was driving people away from working for him. In the time frame that I worked for them, in our department of almost 20 people, 13 people left because they were miserable. Who'd want to work for a person like that? And I worked for other companies where, gosh, when you've got that personal connection and you're reminded that, hey, what you do matters. And some days it might feel like all you're doing is laying bricks, but, and there's lots of distractions and interruptions, but what those interactions and disruptions are opportunities to make a difference. And anyway, so there's lots of stories. And I don't think there's not one silver bullet. There's not one size fits all, because, so what I always do with my speaking is I try to understand what are the challenges and issues of that organization, or of that association, or depending who I'm talking to. And they kind of tell me what they're struggling with. And then what I do, and so this would be kind of a cool tip for any of the speakers out there, would be I look at every speech as a different puzzle. And then what I do, even if it's the same speech that this group and this group are asking me to do, it's still a different audience, and they're inviting me to come in and talk to, maybe they've got two different themes, right? I'm going to make a different puzzle for each group I'm talking to. And, how I prepare and the questionnaire they give me back, it's really fascinating how many different issues that organizations are confronted by. But I know this, and I'll be quiet after this. The number one determinant of our success begins with us and our thinking. The number one determinant of success for an organization begins and ends with its people.
And so with that logic, having employees or contractors or people you do business with having a growth mindset, focusing on the positive, trying and figuring out how to motivate them to add value to the experience and to the culture seems like something that like it honors the person, the people component of the business, in a way that kind of like you don't lose as you kind of grow and scale from the individual to a business. And so, so with that, like what are some of the things that people need to focus on to develop that mindset if they don't already have it?
Yeah, well, you told me you'd be asking me easy questions today. So
I know, man.
Well, I do. Yeah, I don't think people really get burned out by what they do. They get burned out because they forget why they do it. I love sharing the stories of ordinary people who had a growth, I call it a growth mindset, but they thought a little differently. And I really believe in thinking differently, especially if you want new results, or if you just want to feel like, like you're making a difference, or that you like what I mentioned before earlier about learned helplessness. I mean, that's a bad feeling to feel like nothing matters. Like, oh, nobody will notice me. And I mean, that's why people commit suicide. It's like, will I be missed? Right. Or who'd really care if I'm gone? And I mean, whoa, I just went there. But there's so many people that have the low efficacy that they don't really believe in themselves. And I think that's the key. If people really they're believing in themselves and they feel like what they do matters, I mean, they'll be on rocket fuel to show up for work. They'll want to show up early and stay late. I mean, so I think the building blocks to efficacy, now you're going to get me my doctorate research here. I'll keep it kind of light. But two of the biggest building blocks to developing a real powerful belief system are performance accomplishments and what they call verbal persuasion. So let me go back to performance accomplishments. All that means is when you achieve something, right, it makes you feel like, well, okay, well, if I achieved it before, I can probably achieve it again. And I think right now where we're at is this, so many of us are dealing with this learning curve of virtual and just, not being per se in the office as much, if that was our environment before, and now we're doing stuff from home. Business models are upside down. So I know this, I'm a lot more comfortable presenting virtually than I was 5 months ago when I had none of this. Like, this was a huge learning curve for me. So I look at my virtual studio, it's like, gosh, if I've come from this point to this point, imagine where I could be this time next year. As long as I continue to grow, I continue to watch other speakers, continue to sponge other ways of doing stuff. So that's one. And the second would be this, the verbal persuasion is, and Peter, you kind of mentioned this. I mean, my mom was that way with me when she says, how bad do you want it? I mean, to have people that literally tell you, they physically tell you, that you're either good at something, or, I mean, one of the best ways to motivate somebody is to tell them something that they're good at. So if anybody's watching this and they've got a team of people that work for them, or you're going to build a team, one of the best ways to empower people is simply to acknowledge something that person, that one-on-one person's really good at. Even if you have to kind of make it up, just tell them something. I'm not recommending make it up, but you'd be shocked at how that shifts their performance when they get acknowledged.
Yeah. Well,
and a lot of people just don't, they show up for work and they're never acknowledged. They're told what to do, how to do it. And then half the time they get fussed at by doing it that way.
Man, and that's not only true in business, but even in life. So, and as you surround yourself with people that are encouraging you, like you're talking about, helping you reach your goals, performance, accomplishment, and as you're lifted up by that collective kind of like goodwill of the people you surround yourself with, like it probably reinforces itself, and not only yourself, but now you get to do that for other people. And I have no doubt that as a speaker, you seeing changes in the people you speak to has a tremendous impact on you. Like that it feels incredible, like to know that you made a difference in somebody else's life. So the whole thing kind of creates a positive reinforcing cycle. Very, very cool, man. Peter, you have anything?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So listen, I want a question for you. Why do you do what you do? What's your why?
Right now, my why and where I feel so called for speaking is because it gives me, it offers me a platform to use some of my most challenging moments in life to give them purpose, to use them for good. As a speaker, I see myself as a storyteller with a purpose, and my audiences best connect with the stories that I share. Not, the best quotes of all time. I mean, I can drop a couple quotes and I can do certain things, but at the end of the day, the best way that I connect with people is, as a speaker, the best way I'm connecting with them is by sharing something that might be very vulnerable and very transparent that they would not have expected. And when I can talk about my depression, I may have talked to that one person in the room that needed to hear that. That's how I got into speaking. There was a student that saw me speak at a conference. I was just doing my silly Price is Right as part of my story in this leadership talk. And she waited in line to chat with me after the program and just said, thank you. And I could tell there was something going on in her eyes. I could see that I sensed that she felt very lonely. She had come to that conference to kill herself, to commit suicide. And the only reason that she was in my program was because she knew that if she didn't go to a breakout session, that people would come look for her. I mean, I'm getting kind of raw here, but when she emailed me the next day and said, hey, you probably don't remember me, but I remembered her. Her name was Kelly. And she then told me her whole story about how she had come to that conference to commit suicide, and that she had tried to commit suicide before, but people always found her, or, somebody, it was like, wow. And then she tells me her story about how she suffered from depression, and she was in an abusive relationship, and that she had bipolar disorder and all sorts of other things. And I had also had many of those same issues. So here I was sharing my Price is Right, connecting with this student who I'd never met before. And here she was pouring her heart out to me and literally saying that me, little Kevin, planted a new seed of possibility in her head that literally changed her life, literally. And I thought, there's something more here. Mm-hmm. And that was for me the moment that I realized speaking had nothing to do with me. I was just the messenger. And so that's kind of how I look at it now. That's my why, is feeling like I can use any of my junk for good. And if I can do that, then I can give it purpose.
Dude, well, that is awesome. That is incredible. Man, it's been a real pleasure to speak with you and pick your brain on this stuff. How do people find out more about you and what you do and your book and everything else? Yeah, no, honor's all mine. I feel like we could keep talking for a while. But hey, I got a slide. I'll show it to you if you want. You can. So if people want to check me out just on my leadership stuff, it's kevincsnyder.com. That's my speaking business. And then everything with speaker training,
for folks that want to get some. Now I've got some free content too that's on paidtospeak.biz on my website for that. And you can probably hear my neighbor just decided to start cutting their grass.
Perfect timing. All right, my friend. We'll catch you soon. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, guys.
Man, that was cool. I know we covered a lot of different topics. We kind of took many different rabbit holes there. But there's some really good meat in this episode. And, like we mentioned on the intro, like knowing your story, like at the end, he kind of finished up with the story of why he's a speaker and what makes it a must for him. And he talked about the woman that he encountered that heard him speak. Mm-hmm. Like all of us have these stories, and how do they impact us? Like, how can we use those? How can they empower us, therefore, such that we can go and make a difference for somebody else? Or this is, for instance, you hear so many times that someone will start a nonprofit for, alcoholics, perhaps because their dad was an alcoholic, or they go into something for and they feel drawn to science and to genetic research because they have a genetic disease in their family. And so all of us have these things happen to us in life, and we can really look at them as a blessing of sorts to kind of help steer us along that path to what we should be doing, or perhaps, what our calling is.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And the more I go on this entrepreneurial journey and coaching and different students, that common denominator that I seem to find is we're part of this bigger plan, right? And as we are going through life and we're growing or becoming teenagers or young adults or whatever, we come through these, tough moments or whatever. A lot of times it can be that single moment or single experience that defines your why to what you want to do in life. Because for instance, like, look at me, I know I'm freaking amazing, right? But there is backstory. Don't smile. Don't be laughing at it, okay? But listen, the backstory, I sit on the board of directors for a nonprofit that deals with substance abuse. Why do you think that is? My dad was an alcoholic. Alcoholism claimed his life, And so I think those things, when you start looking at why you do what you do, a lot of it has to do with the overall plan that we are here on this particular earth and actually executing and living that out. Because I think that is important. That's when the passion, I think, comes in. Once you do that, you start to be really passionate on going after what you really love.
Well, that also plays into like what we talked about earlier is like, what is it that you do that you absolutely just time stands still for? The things that you enjoy. Or the things that sometimes are painful for you. Like, so for instance, experiences we talked about, when you have a negative thing happen to you, I think the highest calling that you can do or pursue with that is help other people that are going through it. Right. Yeah. Use this as an example to others. We also talked about some of the other things that are involved with, we talked about vision. We talked about, and I love his bar, and if you ever have a chance, he might even have it on YouTube. You have to check it out. His Bob Barker story. Like, I love how that's analogous to like, going out on your own and having a business. And like, it's just this journey, it's just this journey that it's never over. And, you're further down the path than somebody else maybe, and you're not as far down the path as someone ahead of you. And so it's just this ongoing thing, but we kind of got into like some of the things that can influence you to choose which path you decide to get on. Yeah.
So when does your time stop? Is that 2:00 in the afternoon when you're taking a nap?
Right. That's it for me.
That's it for you?
If I could get paid to nap, that would be my life. Like right there. I'm going to have to think of a business opportunity for that.
Hey,
I'm gonna teach people how to nap, man. I hear all the time, I can't take naps. What? Let me
Brilliant.
show you. Let me show you.
And you
the way.
start a podcast. Well, for half an hour you nap.
Right. That's the whole podcast.
Start a podcast when you nap.
It's just silence.
Just silence. Yeah. Brilliant.
I'll look into that. Right. Yeah.
You should hurry up because somebody might jump on this.
Just gonna hear it and you'll run out. Yeah. Right. Well, listen. I hope you got a lot out of the podcast. We covered a lot of different things, and this is one of the episodes I think where there was, like Kevin talked about seeds in the garden and planting seeds, and so I think this is one of those episodes where there are a lot of different seeds scattered, and it's going to be up to you to choose which ones of these you're going to grab onto and implement and apply to your life and your business. And so I'd encourage you to go listen to it again if you missed some of that, because there's a lot of nuggets in there that we didn't quite have the time to fully explore. for time constraints, but there's a lot of really truth and value in there. And so if you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a review. As always, we'd love to hear from you, know what you like, what you don't like, what you would like to see more or less of. And if you'd like to join the conversation and be part of the Life in Air community, go on over and download for free the Life in Air app wherever you download apps, or go to the desktop version at lifeinair.com. As always, we are very grateful and appreciative and humbled by you taking the time out of your day to listen to us. And until next time, live free with abundance and prosperity. See you next time.